Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really significant economic force, U.S. trade strategy,
Right.
specifically the tariffs that have been implemented and, well, their surprisingly broad impact on the chemical and materials industry.
Oh, it's huge.
We've got some detailed information here. It really gets into the nitty-gritty of these tariffs and, what they're setting in motion.
Exactly. Our mission with this deep dive is really to get a clear understanding of how these tariffs are fundamentally changing this vital sector.
Okay.
We'll be looking at the challenges and maybe unexpectedly some of the opportunities that are emerging too.
And what it all means.
Yeah, what it means for different industries and maybe even the products you encounter every single day.
And our main lens for this, it comes from a comprehensive article by Cognitive Market Research. Pretty data-driven stuff.
It is, yeah, rich analysis. So we can really dig into the specifics of, what's actually unfolding.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The article starts by highlighting some specific tariffs. The first one that really jumps out is a 25% tariff on specialty chemicals and intermediates.
Right.
Who are these aimed at, and what kind of materials are we actually talking about here?
So this 25% tariff, it's mainly targeting countries that have a big trade surplus with the U.S. Think China, India, Germany.
The big players.
Exactly. And the materials are the specialty chemicals and intermediates.
Yeah.
Maybe think of it like this. Base chemicals are like flour and sugar, right?
Yeah.
Foundational.
Okay.
Specialty chemicals and intermediates are more refined, like a specific flavoring or a pre-processed dough for a particular product.
Ah, okay. More specific.
Very specific. Things like high-value solvents, performance polymers, industrial additives, and they're crucial for things like electronics, renewable energy, consumer goods.
So not bulk stuff, essential components for high-tech manufacturing.
Precisely. They're not your run-of-the-mill chemicals.
So a 25% cost hike on those components, that must send some shockwaves, right? What are the immediate consequences the article points to?
Yeah, big shockwaves. The article flags a few key immediate effects. Companies are really having to re-examine their supplier contracts.
Renegotiate?
Yeah, head back to the negotiating table on pricing. And maybe even more significantly, there's a big push to explore domestic or, well, regional alternatives.
Sourcing closer to home.
Right. But while that sounds good, the research suggests it often comes at the expense of efficiency and scale.
How so?
Well, these established suppliers, they produce huge volumes, so they can offer much lower prices. A smaller domestic supplier, maybe not the same cost advantage.
Right, economies of scale. Changing suppliers isn't flicking a switch. Now, another area mentioned is potential tariffs on critical minerals, rare earths. This sounds like national security.
It does, yeah. That's the angle. The U.S. has started a national security review, looking at imposing new tariffs or maybe expanding existing ones on critical mineral imports.
And the target is mainly China.
Primarily China, yeah. They dominate the global supply of rare earths and other critical stuff like lithium, cobalt, graphites.
Which are key for?
Well, think clean energy, advanced defense tech, and the whole EV market explosion.
Right. Electric vehicles.
So tariffs here could have really significant ripple effects across those really important industries.
Definitely. You can just imagine the impact on EV battery costs alone.
Wow.
Okay, then there's a third category. 10 to 15% tariffs on base chemicals and bulk materials. These sound more fundamental.
Yeah, these are really the foundational building blocks for a huge range of products.
Like what?
We're talking chemicals like ethylene, propylene, methanol, and bulk materials like aluminum oxide, titanium dioxide.
Stuff that goes into everything.
Pretty much. Plastics and packaging, textiles for clothes, coatings on walls, adhesives, you name it.
So even a 10-15% rise there.
Even that seemingly modest increase at the very basic level, it creates a ripple effect all the way down the manufacturing chain.
Leading to potential price inflation for consumers.
Potentially, yeah. Widespread inflation. So you see how these initial tariffs on specific chemicals kind of start a chain reaction, right? Even hitting materials in, like a plastic container.
So it's not just high-tech feeling the pinch.
Gotcha.
Okay, the article then breaks down the impact on specific subsectors. Let's start with specialty chemicals themselves. Why are they so vulnerable?
Well, it's their very specific, tailored nature. They're often designed for very particular uses,
Yeah.
healthcare, automotive, aerospace, electronics,
Right.
which means their supply chains can be really intricate. They rely on specific, sometimes quite rare, intermediate materials.
Got an example?
Yeah. Think about a specific catalyst used to make OLED screens, maybe sourced from only 2 suppliers globally, and both are hit hard by these tariffs. It creates a real bottleneck.
Ah,
So when you slap a 25% tariff on these highly specialized things,
Yeah.
manufacturers can't just, find a replacement easily.
No easy substitute.
Exactly. The article highlights this forced shift towards alternative regions, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America. But that brings its own set of challenges.
Like what specifically?
Well, think about it. You've got to do serious due diligence on new suppliers.
Check their quality.
Make sure their quality standards meet your, often very strict, requirements. Plus, navigating different regulatory approvals in different countries. That's complex.
Takes time and money.
A lot of time and resources.
Yeah.
Leads to higher costs, sure, but also potential delays getting crucial products out the door.
Right, it's not just the price tag. Okay, what about construction materials? They use a lot of chemicals, right? Insulation, adhesives.
They certainly do. And the construction materials sector, it's facing this really tough dual squeeze.
Dual squeeze.
Yeah. They get hit with tariffs, driving up the cost of key chemical ingredients, think polyurethane, polystyrene. But at the same time, there's rising global demand for construction, pushing prices up anyway.
So pressure from both sides.
Exactly. U.S. manufacturers are in a bind. Do they absorb the costs and watch margins shrink? Or pass them on and risk project delays, maybe even cancellations?
Which impacts infrastructure, real estate.
Big time. And you see the connection, right?
Yeah.
This helps the chemical supply chains get disrupted, and sectors like construction feel it immediately.
Tricky position, especially with all the focus on infrastructure now. Okay, agriculture. Another big chemical user, fertilizers, pesticides. How are they affected?
The challenges in ag chem are almost compounding,
How so?
You've got tariffs on vital inputs like ammonia, urea, phosphate rock. And this hits when the sector is already dealing with climate variability, labor shortages.
Yeah,
Big pressures already.
and agriculture is seasonal.
That's the kicker. It makes it particularly urgent. Any delay getting fertilizers or pesticides can directly whack planting and harvesting schedules.
Affecting yields, the food supply.
Ultimately, yes. The article mentions some companies looking at nearshoring in North America or partnerships in Latin America or Africa, but those are longer-term plays, not much immediate relief.
So farmers might not see help right away. Okay, let's move to automotive. They use a surprising mix of materials, don't they? Plastics, coatings.
Absolutely. The auto industry, especially with the EV shift, relies on these vast, complex, global supply chains.
Yeah.
Things like engineered plastics, special coatings, industrial rubber, laminated glass. And the tariffs. They're significantly bumping up production costs.
Especially for EVs.
Particularly for EVs, they need a whole range of specialized chemical inputs. For batteries, obviously, but also for lightweighting, making vehicles lighter, for efficiency and thermal management systems.
So automakers are rethinking things.
Seriously rethinking supplier strategies. Some are even considering vertical integration, bringing production in-house, or localizing supply chains more.
But short term.
Short term, many face a hit to their cost competitiveness compared to overseas makers without those same tariff burdens.
Right. Okay, finally, packaging. We see material costs there every day.
That's right. Packaging materials critical for food safety, shelf life, farm integrity, e-commerce, all that. They're seeing input costs rise because of tariffs on petrochemical derivatives.
Like polyethylene, polypropylene.
Exactly, and various resins. These higher costs are really squeezing profit margins for packaging companies.
So what are they doing?
Some are experimenting with more recycled or bio-based materials, trying to sidestep the tariffs, maybe?
But that's not simple either.
No. Often requires big capital investment in new equipment, new processes, and sometimes there are trade-offs in material performance that end users might not like.
It definitely paints a picture of widespread impact. Now, the article really emphasizes the U.S.'s reliance on China specifically here. Just how significant is that dependency?
Oh, it's pivotal. Absolutely pivotal. China isn't just a major direct exporter of chemicals and materials to the U.S.
No.
They're also a primary supplier of essential raw materials and intermediates that then get used in other countries that also export to the U.S.
Ah, so it's indirect, too.
Very much so. The article mentions things like specialty chemicals, rare earths, polymers, pigments, additives, advanced intermediates, crucial stuff for pharma, auto coatings, electronics, ag, construction.
So even if something isn't made in China.
Exactly. Its cost and availability can still be heavily influenced by the price and supply of Chinese origin materials used somewhere else in its production.
Oh.
So tariffs aim directly at China. They create these cascading ripple effects through the whole global value chain. Higher costs, instability, even for goods not directly from China.
That layered dependency makes navigating this incredibly complex. So with all these tariffs, what's the direct impact on chemical and material manufacturers here in the U.S.?
The article paints a picture of a significant headwind, a real challenge,
Mhm.
especially for manufacturers who rely on Chinese imports for critical raw materials, things like magnesium, graphite, fluorochemicals, phosphates.
And the cost impact.
For many producers, think industrial coatings, adhesives, plastics, performance materials. These tariffs have already meant substantial inflation in input costs. We're talking like 15 to 30%.
15 to 30. Ouch. That hits margins hard.
Directly eats into profit margins, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's particularly tough on smaller specialty chemical firms or those formulating products with very specific raw material needs.
The ones with less flexibility.
Right. Many operate on just-in-time inventory systems, so any disruption, price, or delivery causes immediate production delays.
And for some niche chemicals, are there alternatives?
Often, not really readily available ones. Think rare earth oxides for magnets, electronics. Few alternative suppliers exist, so companies have little choice. Absorb the higher costs or face major shipment delays.
And shifting sourcing isn't easy to India, Vietnam, the EU.
Not a simple fix, no. The article points out obstacles, regulatory hurdles, longer shipping lead times, potential quality inconsistencies.
And invest.
Significant capital investment needed sometimes.
Mhm.
Technical requalification of materials, retraining the workforce.
Wow.
It's a big undertaking.
And this all ripples outward.
Absolutely. It reverberates through end-user industries. Automotive, semiconductors, aerospace, healthcare, leading to constrained supply, slower product development, and, yeah, potentially rising prices for consumers eventually.
A real shakeup for the whole manufacturing landscape. Now, the article makes an interesting point about market research becoming a valuable tool here. How can that help?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. In this kind of volatile trade environment, market research is really becoming a strategic linchpin.
How so?
It gives manufacturers the crucial data, the insights they need to make informed decisions, reconfiguring supply chains, minimizing tariff risks. It's about being proactive, data-driven.
Okay, how does that work in practice? The article gives examples, right? First, supplier mapping and strategic sourcing analysis. What's that involve?
It's way more than just listing alternative suppliers.
Yeah.
It's a really detailed, granular analysis of potential new sources globally. Market research helps companies understand not just who can supply a chemical, but critical things like its availability, purity, quality standards. Can the supplier scale up production? What's their environmental compliance like? Logistics from, say, Brazil, Malaysia, Kazakhstan, Eastern Europe.
The whole picture.
Exactly. And it also involves carefully looking at trade agreements, USMCA, ASEAN treaties, IPEF, those agreements between countries.
To see if there are better tariff conditions.
Yeah, or more predictable customs processes. It's about evaluating the entire potential supply chain.
Okay, really digging deep. What's the next way market research helps?
Raw material cost tracking and trend forecasting. This is absolutely crucial now, with prices being so volatile.
Makes sense.
Market research lets companies track prices meticulously: crude oil derivatives, base metals, rare earths, the foundations. Using cost modeling, analyzing volatility trends, seeing how prices correlate with macro indicators.
To predict future shifts.
To develop informed forecasts, yeah. Which allows them to make strategic decisions, like hedging contracts to lock in prices, or maybe exploring alternative formulations if they see a big price hike coming for something like, say, lithium carbonate.
So trying to get ahead of the curve.
Exactly. One company, using this kind of tracking, anticipated a big spike in a lithium compound, secured a long-term contract, and apparently saved over 15% compared to spot prices later on.
Smart move. Okay, the article also mentions formulation innovation and feedstock substitution. How does research help there?
Well, in chemicals, there's often some flexibility, some room for creativity in formulations.
Right.
Market research can pinpoint opportunities to replace a high-cost or tariff-heavy feedstock with something cheaper or easier to get. That still works.
Like swapping petroleum-based for bio-based.
Could be, yeah. Or finding a greener, regionally sourced solvent instead of one hit by tariffs. Research helps explore new material combos, different chemical reps.
To get the same performance without the tariff pain.
Essentially, yes. Especially in coatings, adhesives, plastics, where there's often more wiggle room in the exact chemical makeup.
Interesting. Almost re-engineering around the tariffs. What about understanding market demand? Market demand monitoring and elasticity modeling.
Right. Because higher costs from tariffs can affect demand for the final products, especially in price-sensitive areas like packaging or basic industrial chemicals.
So research helps figure out how sensitive demand is. Elasticity.
Precisely. If a packaging material cost goes up 10%, does demand drop 2%, 10%, 20%. Elasticity modeling helps answer that by looking at channel behavior, customer reactions, competitor actions.
Companies can set better pricing strategies.
Make more informed decisions, yeah. Maybe tiered pricing, adding value, bundling products. Yeah. Trying to keep market share without killing revenue.
Understanding their actual pricing power. Okay, lastly, regulatory intelligence and scenario simulation. Sounds vital right now.
Absolutely critical. Things change so fast. U.S.-China policy, broader rules like REACH in Europe. You need up-to-the-minute intelligence.
And scenario simulation.
Market research teams use that to think through what-ifs. What if there are tighter rules on fluorinated chemicals? What if China restricts exports of graphite or gallium?
Planning for possibilities.
Exactly. Simulating these scenarios lets companies develop mitigation strategies proactively. Maybe long-term contracts, stockpiling critical components, investing in recycling or circular economy solutions.
Building resilience.
That's the goal. Proactive planning, regulatory foresight key for long-term resilience and sustainable growth.
It definitely sounds like market research has become truly indispensable here. Okay, the article then touches on actual strategic responses from companies. What trends are emerging?
We're seeing some pretty significant and rapid adjustments. A clear trend is companies actively trying to reduce dependency on Chinese imports.
How?
Big global players, BASF, Dow, DuPont, they're investing more in regional manufacturing hubs, US, India, Central Europe.
To produce closer to market?
Right. Reduce risks from long shipping distances and uncertain trade policies. And some specialty firms, like Albemarle, Solvay, are even exploring vertical integration.
Getting involved earlier in the supply chain.
Yeah, like in raw material extraction and processing.
Yeah.
Gives them much greater control over their critical sources right from the start.
That's a big shift, controlling the raw material source. What other strategies are popping up?
Beyond geography, there's a lot of investment in digital tech. Better supply chain platforms, AI for inventory management, even blockchain for transparency and better forecasting.
To react faster.
Make procurement more agile, react quicker to cost fluctuations or policy changes. And we're also seeing a growing focus on R&D in sustainable chemistry.
Developing alternatives.
New materials, new processes that rely less on tariffed or restricted substances. Plus, it aligns with ESG goals, which are increasingly important.
So it's about adaptation.
Fundamentally, yeah. The article stresses that the companies likely to thrive long-term see these disruptions not just as problems, but as catalysts, opportunities to transform operations and use market research strategically.
Turning challenge into opportunity. Okay, before we wrap up, the article includes a fast fact. What's the nugget?
The fast fact really hammers home that point about market research in action. It specifically mentions manufacturers using these insights to evaluate alternative sources for those critical industrial minerals and specialty chemicals, looking seriously at countries like India, Brazil, Poland.
As a direct response to the tariffs.
Exactly. A strategic response to the U.S.-China situation underscores the goal of reducing reliance on one source, building more agile, resilient supply chains.
That's a really insightful fast fact, a great takeaway. So to summarize our deep dive today, it's clear these U.S. tariffs are having a really significant multi-level impact on chemicals and materials.
Absolutely.
Affecting everything from specific chemical prices right through to the long-term strategies of major companies. And that deep reliance on the global supply chain, especially China.
It just amplifies everything across so many sectors.
And it's also clear that, well, sophisticated market research and a proactive, adaptable approach are just crucial now for companies navigating this landscape.
Exactly right. And it leaves us, maybe leaves you, our listener, with a really important thought.
Yeah.
Just consider for a moment how these huge shifts in the global chemical and materials world might indirectly touch the products you use every single day.
Your phone, your car.
Your electronics, your car materials, the packaging on your food. What long-term consequences could these trade strategies have on innovation, on the resilience of our supply chains?
It's all connected.
Much more interconnected than it might seem at first glance. Definitely a lot to think about.